So I'll add to all the welcomes you've had. Welcome to Aish. Let's talk a little bit about what Aish is all about. I'm not sure what you came for. I don't know what you had in mind. I don't know what you were told. Yeah, it's a fun place. What is Aish all about? Number one, Judaism is real. It's not tradition, it's not sentiment, it's not culture. It's real. God really exists. He's really there. It's real. It's not just, what do they say? The simple answer to all of life's difficult questions. No, God's really there. To learn that, understand what he's about, develop a relationship with him, and that's very real. That's very, very real. Understanding what this mitzvah thing is all about, whether it's between God and man, between man and man, between man and himself, is real. That's number one. That's number one. So that includes going through the logical steps and understanding that he really exists. And what we mean when we say God. That's number one. Number two, responsibility. And that is that every Jew has responsibility for one's own life and for the nation. To us, that's crucial. You may not have noticed, but the Jewish nation is falling apart. Intermarriage in North America has hit 72% and is climbing. I've been trying to, over years now, put together the different surveys of how many Jews there are. There's such discrepancies. There's a discrepancy of 2 million among the different surveys of how many Jews there are just in North America. Nobody knows how many Jews there are. And who's going to be left? Everyone's got to take responsibility, not just for themselves and their families, for the whole of the Jewish nation. And we certainly hope that by the time you leave, you're going to know your Judaism is real, and you're going to make sure that Jews know and appreciate what they have. Most Jews are abandoning something they never got to know in the first place. It's kind of hard to blame someone for opting out when the Judaism you're taught is empty and meaningless. It's a bunch of tradition and just standing in the way of you doing everything you enjoy doing. That's not what Judaism is. People have to know what it is that they're rejecting, and the odds are they won't reject it so fast. That, in short, is what we're about. I hope you're going to get that. And if you don't feel you're getting it, then you demand it. If at any point you feel that what you're being taught is not real, if at any point you feel that you're being given fluff or anything that's not real, say so. Say so. That's not what you came here for. Okay, that's the first part. So I certainly do hope you're going to get everything we want you to this year. And you'll leave here loving your Judaism and wanting to share it with everyone you know. Now we move on. Who was the first Jew? Avraham Avinu, right? Avraham was the first Jew. How did he get there? How did he get there? He was probably the last person on earth we would have thought to have arrived at what he did. He was the son of Terach, who manufactured idols. He grew up in a pagan home that didn't just worship pagan gods, but created them. And he searched for truth. He single-handedly discovered God. He figured it out. But it didn't end there. Do you know, Avraham Avinu figured out all of the mitzvahs. He figured the whole Torah out on his own, including rabbinical law. And that's wild. He figured it all out. How did he do that? It doesn't say. There is no mention of this in the Chumash or in Chazal, anywhere. Yeah, we get the story. He went and he knocked down all the idols except for one. His father comes, what happened? He says, they got into a fight and this one idol knocked all the others out. So he told me, we can't do that. So idols don't knock each other down. They're just stones. So how can you worship them? That was the most profound argument we find in the Gemara. And we understand that they weren't just bowing down to sticks and stones. They were making use of all sorts of negative powers that Hashem put into this world. It wasn't so simple that they were bowing down to a stone that they knew couldn't do anything. By the way, so what did he mean? The way all of idolatry worked, it worked through the negative forces, the koches hatuma. And if you went through certain rituals, you would get whatever it was that you wanted. So this is what you have to do to get rain. This is what you have to do to get healed from something. And these things worked. They worked. Hashem put those powers into the world. They worked. What's the key? They're not gods. They don't decide anything. You can manipulate nature using these negative forces. But how could you talk of this as your deity? They have no minds of their own. Avraham Avinu was trying to point this out by saying, you see, they can't initiate anything to get rid of one another. They don't have minds of their own. That was his message there. But that was only one fraction of Avraham Avinu's logical investigations into truth, where he discovered Hashem. There is no record of any of them. There's no record of any of them. What do we read about Avraham Avinu? What does the Torah tell us about Avraham Avinu? What are all the stories about? One thing. Chesed. Caring for people. He's all about chesed. Why is the philosophy left out? Why is it all about chesed? Boiling hot day. He's not well. Oh, there's no one to give to. Hashem has to create a miracle. He sends him 3 angels. Avraham Avinu pleads for Sodom. Sodom was a wild place. Chesed was punishable by death in Sodom. Chesed was punishable by death. Avraham Avinu pleaded on their behalf. And he tells Hashem, could it be that the judge of all mankind does not do justice? Maybe there's a tzaddik there. Well, he starts off, maybe there are 50, maybe there are 40. He's pleading. Why is he pleading on behalf of Sodom? If Avraham Avinu was the one who stands for chesed, and this is the place that considers chesed criminal, how do you plead for that? His chesed knows no bounds. His chesed knows no bounds. That's what he's famous for. Why do we not read anything about his philosophical investigations? Only about his chesed. How come? We understand the central role of chesed in Judaism. But what we get out of this is that the role it plays is that it really comes first. It comes before anything else. You know why? So long as we are selfish, self-involved, locked up in our own little boxes, we will never be able to discover truth. You can't find truth when you're subjective. Every individual is only capable of seeing things in his own subjective way. The only way you stand a chance of finding truth is when you're open to others. When you're open to caring about others, understanding about others, understanding the way they work. Only then, when you leave your own little box and you're open, is there any hope of objectivity. Sure, Judaism is based on truth, but you can't find truth so long as you're just self-involved. No individual can do that. Truth is bigger than any one yachid, than any one individual. It all begins with caring for others and wanting to understand others. That comes first. So you got to get this straight. We hope that throughout the course of this year, you'll be enlightened. We hope that you'll discover truth. But what's crucial is that you're also going to learn to get out of your own little boxes, to transcend your own subjectivity. Be open to understanding other people and the way they think. That doesn't mean compromising on right and wrong, but it means understanding others so that you have the ability to think out of your own box. In very simple terms, we take that as midos, your own character traits, working on your character, improving your character, comes before deos, comes before your philosophy. You can't talk philosophy if you're selfish. You can't talk philosophy if you're subjective. The study of Bein Adam L'Chavero that I hope you'll be getting into this year in a very serious way is not only important because you got to be a good person. It's necessary for the sake of being able to pursue truth in your own lives. Okay, I hope that's very clear. And this is so basic to Judaism. I've always pointed out the Jewish nation has two obsessions, and this is true across the board of all Jewish communities, regardless of their color, form of observance, non-observance. We're obsessed with two things. One is the need for social justice. Jews are crazy about that. We've been at the forefront of every movement for social justice that there's ever been, right or wrong. And the second, we're also obsessed with the need for education. We're crazy about it. Proportionately, the amount of Jews in higher education is higher than most other ethnic groups. Not to mention yeshivas. But it's just so much part of the Jewish personality. It seems that these two are really the essence of what Judaism is. The pursuit of social justice, caring about others, caring about the underprivileged, caring about everybody. And the pursuit of truth was what education is supposed to be. Where it comes from is Torah. Yes, starting with Avraham Avinu. He discovered truth. How so? By caring for every human being. That's where it began. All right, time to move on. Just a little deeper. You're all familiar with the phrase, Derech Eretz Kadma LaTorah. Derech Eretz. Derech Eretz. What do we say, being a mensch? Derech Eretz. Some people call it manners. But that comes before Torah. It's the introduction to Torah. So I think that is not always understood sufficiently. I would like to share with you something that we find in the introduction to all of the Gemara, the introduction to Talmud Bavli, written by Rab Nissen Gaon. I'm sure you'll get this somewhere in the Masorah or your history. The Gaonim are way back when. It's printed on the first page of Masechta Brachas, the first Masechta in Talmud Bavli. And he writes as follows. He says that Torah is not starting from scratch. Torah is already assuming that you're an intelligent human being and live like one. Torah is there to give you the next step. And he says, anything that is common sense, every human being is responsible for, Jewish and otherwise, and age is irrelevant. As long as they've got brains, as long as their brain is developed enough to understand it, anything you could understand as being common sense, you're held responsible for. What is his proof? His proof is the city of Sodom. The pasuk says that the reason why they were destroyed, because Yad Oni ve'Evion lo herziku. They weren't there for the people in need. They didn't help the needy. So he asks, non-Jews only have to keep the 7 Noahide laws. One of those laws is not chesed. Chesed is a Torah concept for Jews. Chesed is not one of the Sheva mitzvos. Why was the entire city of Sodom and Amorah and Admah and Zeboim, why were they all destroyed? Everybody there died for not fulfilling a commandment that they were never commanded? They were never commanded to do it. Why were they destroyed? So he says, it is the common human experience, the universal human experience, that helping people is right. The idea that doing chesed is criminal negates common sense. It negates something that every human being can appreciate. You don't need the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach to tell you to do chesed. Certainly, you don't need the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach to teach you that chesed is not criminal. And he writes there, we find in several places in the Gemara where the Gemara asks for the source of a certain halacha. And it brings a verse, it brings a pasuk. And the Gemara asks, Lama likra, why do I need a pasuk? Svarahi. It makes sense. It's common sense. So that means that the Gemara is telling us, if something is common sense, we don't need a pasuk for it. So he then asks, the Torah does say don't steal, don't kill. Aren't those rational? He says the reason the Torah says don't steal and don't kill is because the Torah's definition of murder and theft is different than what you and I would have thought on our own. It's only because of these details of what's included in them that the Torah mentioned them. Otherwise, there would have been no need for it. Anything that is obvious to a human being The Torah doesn't have to tell you. So I want to take this a little further. You know, we have so many laws of keeping kosher, the dietary laws. What is the status of, pardon me if it sounds morbid, eating human flesh? Permissible or not? Does it say it anywhere in the Torah? Nowhere. Doesn't say it anywhere. So it's permissible, no? Why isn't it permissible? I'll tell you. There have been famous rabbis that got up and said, if you were shipwrecked on an island and had a choice between eating non-kosher meat or human flesh, eat the human flesh. Because non-kosher meat, the Torah says is non-kosher. Human flesh, the Torah never said is non-kosher. Doesn't sound like you agree. Anyone who is capable of eating human flesh, the Torah is not talking to him. The Torah is speaking to people that are already human. The Torah is speaking to people that have a sense of common decency, a basic respect for the human race where you don't eat the flesh of a human being. If you don't understand that, there's something that comes before Torah then. You're not ready for the Torah. Torah is taking people who are already human beings, thinking people who live by what they know is right. And the Torah is taking us a step higher. But something so basic. I'll give you another example. Torah gives a whole list of whom one may not marry. According to most Rishonim, the Torah does not explicitly prohibit intermarriage. Why not? Because it's not so bad? If you don't feel like marrying in the nation, if you don't feel like being part of the Jewish people, the Torah's not talking to you. The Torah's not talking to you. Because the first thing that has to be clear, you're a human being and you want to be part of the Jewish nation. You're not sure about that? Go do your homework. The Torah is not yet speaking to you. So, basic issues in Bein Adam L'Chaveru are not covered by the Torah. You could sort of read them into the Torah, but that's not what the Torah is coming to teach us. The Torah is coming to teach us a different level of humanity, a godly level of humanity. Just to be a decent human being, to respect the fact that other people have possessions and you don't lay a hand on someone else's possession without permission. You don't need the Torah to tell you that. It's the details that we would not necessarily been able to figure out on our own. Avraham Avinu did, but we don't. And areas of life that we would never have thought of having to do anything about. That's where Torah comes in. Rav Nissen Gon says that this covers all aspects of life. He even says that's true of emunah. He says the knowledge of the existence of Hashem is logical, and therefore we cannot say that the Torah commands us to believe in God. Because that's simple. We got to figure out what the mitzvah of emunah is. I'm sure you'll study it. We teach that here. So whether it's bein adam lamakom, between man and his creator, whether bein adam lechavero, between man and his fellow, anything that is rational comes before Torah. And there's one other aspect of life that isn't spoken about so much, but is also fundamental. And that's bein adam la'atzmo, between man and himself. Included in that, number one, integrity. In the laws of bein adam lechavero, we usually start with the laws of truth and lying. One thing you've got to understand is that it's not only bein adam lechavero. It's not only that you are lying to someone else. Integrity is a basic human value. You've got to learn to cherish your own integrity and not sacrifice it for something silly. People sacrifice their integrity for money, for their reputation. Integrity is basic to being a human being. If honesty doesn't mean anything to you, then nothing means anything to you, because you can just lie to yourself about everything. You can lie to yourself about what you're up to, what you're doing. So many people do. You know, there are two ways of dealing with the fact that our actions are not in sync with what we know is right. One way is to warp our sense of right and wrong, and the other one is to be dishonest with ourselves about what we're up to. People do both. But if you don't have a sense of integrity, if integrity doesn't mean anything to you, then you can lie to yourself all day. You'll be living in denial about what you're doing. You can find yourself really going off the deep end and in total denial. Your whole lifestyle can deteriorate, but you're lying to yourself. Integrity is so basic. The other one is dignity, which I believe is the proper translation of tznius, and then I'm sure you'll learn plenty about. All of this comes before Torah, and Torah teaches us new levels and new ways to look at things. Okay, want to move on to the next? Am I hitting you with too much? It's okay, we'll go further. The Rambam is in his introduction to Mishnah. It's a lengthy introduction to Seder Zron, the beginning of Mishnah. So a lot of it is talking about the Masorah. He gets into a lot of technicalities. The 8th parak, he gets into the fundamentals of Jewish philosophy. And he goes through the following logical stages, in terms of the way Jews think. And he begins. He says everything that God created, he created for a reason. So why did he create the universe? Why did he create our planet? Why did he create everything on it? Be it vegetation, be it animal. Why did he create it all? Says the Rambam, we believe that it was all created for us. The proof being that we learn to use it. You know, over the generations, Rambam was talking way back when. Today we can say it with so much more confidence. We learn how to utilize almost everything in nature to our benefit. So the Rambam says we can simply observe that all of this was created for humanity. Everything was created for humanity. Which, by the way, although this is basic to Judaism, you gotta be careful when you say that today, because Western liberal thinking believes that this is terribly off. It's the human being seeing himself as supreme over the rest of nature. The same way the dog is my environment, I am the dog's environment. And I'm not saying that sarcastically. And that is what people really believe. Who said that we're better? Who said that they're there to serve us? Who am I to tell my dog what to do? Well, the Rambam makes it very, very clear. In Judaism, it is not so. So much so that, there's a halacha of tzar balei chayim. Yeah, you're not to torture animals. Why not? The Rishonim explain, not because we don't have the right to torture animals, because I can get a lawyer to represent someone's dog because he's being abused. It is beneath us to torture animals. This is not bein adam levehemto, between man and his animal. This is bein adam la'atzmo, between man and himself. It is beneath us to be cruel to animals. What kind of human being are you if you're cruel to animals? It's not animals' rights. It's the responsibility of a human being. But yes, the Rambam writes, the entire animal kingdom was created for humanity, for us. All of nature was created for us, for humanity. Then he takes the next step. So what were we created for? Says the Rambam, what is it that we have that no animal has? He calls it wisdom, and he defines it as knowing reality as it is. In other words, understanding truth. Now, it's very difficult to really argue this one. None of us was ever an animal. We don't know what's going on in the mind of an animal. But it seems very clear in the way we're capable of conditioning animals that they don't really think for themselves. They only think the way they were programmed, whatever it is that their instincts tell them to do. And yes, you can condition them on the basis of reward and punishment, because that's part of their instinct. A cow cannot go on a diet. There's no such thing as a cow making a decision. I am no longer going to eat grass on Tuesdays. Or I'm going to stop at a certain point. So long as there's grass there, the cow is going to eat. It is only a human being that can think and say, objectively speaking, although instinctively I feel like doing something, I don't want to. The human being has the ability to think for himself. Says the Rambam, if that's the case, it must be that the purpose of the existence of the human being is to enhance his intelligence. This is what the Rambam writes. So then the Rambam asks a question. if that is so, then we should just be a bunch of academics. Why is the Torah filled with rules? Who cares about our behavior? Just be wise. We should just be studying in terms of how we behave, whatever you feel like doing. Says the Rambam. But if you know something is right and you do something else, then you're not wise. In his words, if you're some great academic, but you live like an animal, then you are an animal. You're not wise. What is the Rambam saying? The Rambam is defining wisdom in Judaism. Wisdom does not mean memorizing volumes. Wisdom does not mean the fact that you have the ability to analyze information. Wisdom is internalized wisdom. Wisdom is that which changes your attitudes. The idea of Torah is to teach us to really be wise, the barometer of which is the way you behave. So long as you say, yeah, I know it's wrong, but you don't know it's wrong. If you can say, I know I should be doing this, but I don't feel like it, what you're really saying is, I don't really know I should be doing it. Did you ever see someone standing in front of oncoming traffic and saying, yeah, I know, I'm just not up to dealing with it now? No one talks that way. How come? Because, you can get hit by a car. When people say, I know, but, what they're really saying is, I don't really know. Wisdom in Judaism is you understand it to the point that you change the way you think. You change your attitude. This, by the way, affects changes on every level, including physiological ones. I'll give you a very simple example. The Rambam Mishnah Torah talks about what it means to be wise. And he says I guess Aristotle's golden medium, the middle road is the wise one to take, not to be an extremist on any side. And then the Rambam goes to describe all the different midos, all the different character traits. And he says that if you really like that, then you're wise. And then the Rambam goes and gives us examples. And he says, a wise man only has an appetite for food that is good for him. The Rambam does not say that a wise person only eats health food. The Rambam says that a wise person only has an appetite for healthy food. How does wisdom affect what you have an appetite for? Your taste buds? That's physiological. How's that possible? So I think there's a very simple example. And forgive me if this is too much for you. Come on, we were all kids. If you found a once licked lollipop sitting on the floor, you wouldn't have eaten it? In fact, what's more appetizing? A fresh one out of the package that's doesn't shine, or one that's already been licked? Some dirt on it, who cares? Every kid, what do you mean? Parents have to protect their kids from eating dirt. How come our mouths don't water when we see that today? Because we're germ conscious. How does being germ conscious affect your taste buds? Yeah. Our attitudes don't just change the way we think, they change the way we feel. They change everything within us physiologically. This is so real. Wisdom is that which has to become the way you think and the way you feel. Studying does not mean memorizing a bunch of facts. You don't have to do that anymore. Everything's available, a couple of keystrokes. Wisdom is what's been internalized. What are the attitudes you formed? Ben Adam L'Chaveru is a great place to start. The way we view one another, the way we deal with society, the way we deal with ourselves. These are all attitudes. These are attitudes that we form on the basis of being enlightened. The study of Torah is not just a matter of memorization or analyzation. It's one of developing sane attitudes, wise attitudes. Learning how to live sanely, how to think sanely, how to feel sanely. Again, Beit Adam L'Chaveru is a perfect place to start. So I certainly hope that everything you're going to be studying this year is not just going to be a matter of memorization for tests, but these are going to be internalized. And the only way they're internalized is if you allow yourself to really work through them. Does it make sense to you? Does it not make sense to you? Do you think it's right? Do you not think it's right? You're going to ask me, who are you to think it's not right? Where'd your brain come from? Who gave you your brain? The Creator himself. There are those who write that there is a contradiction between something you find in the Torah and what your brain tells you. That's like a contradiction between two psukim in the Chumash. Because your brain is God-given and the Torah is God-given. How can God say two opposite things? So what you have to do is figure out which one is wrong. Did you misunderstand what the Torah is telling you? Or did you misunderstand what your brain is telling you? But they've got to be in sync. It couldn't be that your God-given brain says one thing and the Torah says something else. It couldn't be. There's only one God. It couldn't be. So if you study something, you learn something, and your brain tells you this doesn't make sense, you've got to work through where's the mistake. And you've got to demand this of teachers. Something's wrong. Either the understanding of the Torah that is being presented is off, or help me understand why my thinking is off. But otherwise, they've got to be in sync. They must be telling you the same thing. The idea of Torah study is becoming wise. Becoming wise in the way you think, in the way you feel, in the way you live. I certainly hope you'll be getting that here, and a lot of it. All right, I think that's enough. Is there any questions? I'm open. Yeah. No questions? I don't know if it's a good sign or a bad one. Okay. So enjoy your year.
She has a question.
Yeah.
Maybe I just misunderstood what you were saying, but when you were talking about how the Torah doesn't speak to humans who don't understand common decency, what does that mean for like religious Jews who like, I don't know, have like accusations against them or like aren't great people in society? Like,
Is-
controversial question.
No, it's not a controversial question. It's very difficult to generalize. It seems that society has a very interesting definition of Orthodox. What mitzvahs do you have to keep to be an Orthodox Jew? So, if it turns that an Orthodox Jew is dishonest or an Orthodox Jew is abusive, what makes him Orthodox? Why did we decide that if you keep kosher, you're Orthodox, even though you steal? But if you don't keep kosher, but you're honest, you're not Orthodox. As far as I understand, Orthodox means you've accepted 613 commandments. How can you just decide that you don't accept some of them and then call yourself Orthodox? So why is it that you'll have Orthodox Jews doing that? So the first answer could be that they're not Orthodox. They affiliate Orthodox. They identify Orthodox. But they're obviously non-observant. And I guess they were putting on a show. That's one. There are some people that are actually good people but have struggles. And there, one of the things that we're going to have to learn is that we can't be judgmental. We're fortunate, I hope we all are, we're fortunate that we don't have these struggles. We're fortunate that we don't have to go through life restraining ourselves from harming other human beings. For most healthy people, that's not what you have to restrain yourself from doing. And as a result of it, we can't really judge. There's some people for whom the test is just so difficult. Who knows how we would have done. I once had a situation, I don't know how much you'll appreciate it, but I had a situation of turns out there was a member of the community that had fooled everybody. And he was living two lives, one here and one in America. He had a family here, and he was living with some woman over there. And he was a total fraud. What he did for a profession he wasn't licensed to do, and he walked off with a fortune of our shul's accent of the bank account. And he passed away, which is also very mysterious. And I was in shock because I found everything out the day of the funeral. And what are we supposed to do? So I decided I was going to run and go ask somebody a little older and wiser. There was a great Jew, Michal Yehuda Lefkowitz, who lived in Bnei Brak, who was the person you went to for such things. I went to him, I gave him the whole story with all the gory details. And he looks me in the eye and he says, who knows if we're any better in dealing with our struggles than he was in dealing with his? How do you know? You're not someone that would ever dream of doing anything like that. But whatever it is that you do struggle with, who says that you're any better? So in terms of generalizing, and just automatically saying that someone who does something outrageous is just automatically is just evil itself. We have to understand we all struggle. I'm not trying to be too understanding, but if you're asking a general question, yeah. Can these people be allowed loose in society? No, because they're dangerous. But in terms of judging them as people, who knows? Who knows? We should never be tested with such crazy things. Yeah.
If Hashem created our brains and the Torah, in the end of the day, isn't the Torah right, so we have to agree with the Torah?
It couldn't be that Hashem put something into your brain that doesn't agree with Torah. If it doesn't make sense to you, you either misunderstood the Torah or are misunderstanding your brain. The two must be in sync. It's not that one's right and one's wrong and you can choose Torah over your brain. They both have to be right and they can't be contradictory. Now you got to figure out where you went wrong. Either you read the Chumash wrong, you read the halacha wrong, you were taught the halacha wrong, or you're misunderstanding what your brain is telling you. Yeah. Does I have you? Oh, yeah.
So if we consider ourselves Orthodox, for whatever reason, keep Shabbos kosher,
Orthodox person has to keep all of the mitzvot. Is anyone truly ever Orthodox? Like, we're not perfect people.
What it means is that we are committed. We understand that life is a growth process. We are not born perfect. In fact, we are born, the pasuk says, "Va'ayir pera adam yivoled." We are born wild animals. We are born with all sorts of negative instincts. Life is a struggle. Life is a growth process. I would define an Orthodox Jew as one who is committed to arriving at a point where he'll be observing all the mitzvahs. In other words, he takes everything seriously, and we'll see to it that he gets there someday. But that we are all keeping everything all the time. Yaakov Avinu was the only person that got there. Yeah.
If our brain is misunderstanding something, is it our ego that's in the way of it, or just like our past experience?
I don't know if it's our ego. I don't know if it's our early childhood experiences. I don't know what it is, but you got to read your brain. You got to know what your brain is really telling you, and often we don't understand what we're telling ourselves. What gets in the way? Yes, it could be that our understanding of ourselves is jaded by our experiences. It's very possible.